Hi, this is Bazi from Meslova Dizzy Classroom. In previous session, we learned about importance and transportation of gases and how exchange happens, and also role of hemoglobin, how it carries the molecules of glucose and how the glucose is converted into simple sugar in the process of glycolysis, and how the anaerobic respiration occurs without presence of oxygen. We learned all these things. But now how the aerobic respiration, which is happens only within the presence of oxygen, and how the energy is produced within the body through the energy producing machine, that is ATP producing machine, that is mitochondria of our cell. We all know about the structure of different cells, especially the types of cells, that is prokaryotic cell and then eukaryotic cell. Eukaryotic, which is present in advanced development of multicellular organisms, whereas prokaryotic cell, which is present in the primitive cells, that is like in bacteria. This energy is produced, or cellular respiration takes place within the cells, and this ATP is produced within the cell organelle, that is mitochondria. If oxygen is available, the aerobic respiration occurs within the cells of mitochondria of eukaryotic cell, whereas it occurs in cytoplasm or cytosol of prokaryotic cell. The mitochondria are the ATP generating machines of all living eukaryotic cells. We know that glucose molecule is the most used sugar molecule to deriving energy in all plants, animals and microbes. In all these organisms, the glucose molecule is oxidized in two stages. In first stage, that is glycolysis, how it breaks down into simple sugar molecules of 2 pyruvic acids, we already learned, and also the anaerobic respiration without presence of oxygen. In the mitochondria of all these cells, the food is converted into a energy molecule, that is ADP, that is adenosine triphosphate. ATP is released by the mitochondria, so cells can use it. The structure of mitochondria, the mitochondria is surrounding by two layers. The outermost layer and the inner layer, which is folded and surrounding the matrix. This folded layer we call it as cristae. The space between inner and outer mitochondria is filled by cytosol. ATP is produced in inner layers of mitochondria, that is matrix, through a process or mechanism called oxidative phosphorylation, involving several protein complex mechanisms. From the digestion of food, it provides high energy electron in the form of NADH, which we use by the protein complexes to pump protons from the matrix to inner membrane space. This continuous pumping creates proton gradient, where positively charged protons are attracted to more negatively charged matrix. When the protons re-enter the matrix through the ATP synthase protein complex, they catalyze the production of ATP. It's the overall production of ATP in our body. In detail, how actually this process will going on. The overall process of this production of ATP occurs in 4 stages. That is the glycolysis. Already we know how the glycolysis produces ATP and pyruvic acids and NADH. And next stage is oxidation of this pyruvic acid. And then pyruvic acid is further oxidized and enters into KREBS cycle, which is also called as citric acid cycle. And then next stage is electron transport chain. From all these 4 stages, the ATP is produced within the cellular respiration. We already know about the glycolysis in which we get 2 pyruvic acid molecules, 2 ATPs and 2 highly electron carriers, that is NADH. In next step, what happens, these 2 molecules of pyruvic acid and NADH within the presence of ATP, they enters into the matrix of the mitochondria. Here each pyruvate molecules undergoing oxidation and they convert into 2 acetyl coenzyme A molecules, and the NAD plus molecules, they are getting oxidized. In this process, the electrons are transferred to NAD plus molecules and they are releasing 2 molecules of carbon, and the carbon dioxide is also produced in this process. The next stage is start by 2 molecules of acetyl coenzyme A molecules. Here this acetyl coenzyme A getting oxidized, and this cycle is also called as KREBS cycle or citric acid cycle. You know, Sir Hans KREBS proposed this cycle in 1937. This cycle starts with a 4 molecule oxaloacetate. Here the acetyl coenzyme A molecules combined with 4 carbon molecules of oxaloacetate. Hence we call it as citric acid cycle. And all these things are undergoing series of enzymatic redox reactions in which all carbons, hydrogens and oxygen molecules are end up with carbon dioxide and water. Why we call it as a cycle? Because this cycle starts and ends with the same molecule, that is 4 carbon molecule oxaloacetate. Hence we call it as a cycle. For every glucose molecule that enters into the glycolysis, the KREBS cycle completes twice. At the end of each KREBS cycle, it produces 8 NADH, 2 FADH2s, 2 ATPs and 6 carbon dioxide molecules are produced for each glucose molecule. Then the maximum number of ATPs, that is energy, is produced in next step, that is next stage, by 2 NADH and FADH, which are carrying the strong electron carriers through the process called electron transport chain. It occurs in the membrane of the mitochondria. You know, it's a series of membrane bound carriers that present in the mitochondria, and they carry electrons from one to another. As the electrons are carried between the membrane proteins, the cell is capture the energy to produce ATP molecule. Proteins in the chain pump, which is hydrogen ions, that is protons across the membrane, they are reaching to the outer surface of the membrane and they increase the proton gradation. And these accumulation of protons within the 2 membranes, it leads to a high pump proton gradation. These protons are flow back into the matrix across the membrane through an ATP synthase complex, an amazing nanoscale machine. It's a high-tech micromolecular power generator inside the cells of our body. It generates the fuel, that is ATP. Hence we call the mitochondria is the powerhouses of the cell. It produces ATP and also it stores the ATP. The oxygen acts as terminal electron acceptor and also it combines with hydrogen ions. By accepting electrons, oxygen is reduced to form water, a byproduct of electron transport chain mechanism. From all these processes, the glycolysis, KREBS cycle and electron transport chain involves net of on an average of 32 to 36 molecules of ATP is produced. If we observe the overall process of this cellular respiration, we observe about 32 to 36 molecules of ATP produced per each and every glucose molecules. What is this ATP and how it is made up of? You know, the ATP is having a nitrogenous base, that is adenine, with a ribose sugar and attached to 3 phosphorus molecules through a bonds. This energy is present in 3 phosphate bonds. These bonds are looking like 3 kids present in the same bus who hate each other. If one kid kicks another kid, then the energy released means if the bond broken between the phosphate molecules or phosphate groups, the enormous energy will released. During this bond breaking, the amount of energy from the each and every molecule of ATP is about 7500 calories or 7.5 kilocalories of energy is released. If we observe the entire process of cellular respiration in briefly, have a look on this and we have to see this. During the cellular respiration, the energy is released and also this stored in various parts of our body, and also during this process heat also generated. During this cellular respiration, the energy is released in the form of ATP. Some of this energy is stored in the form of ATP and some of the energy is used in the process of metabolic activities and some of the energy is lost in the form of heat or dissipated to surroundings. The overall cellular respiration or respiration mechanism is a exothermic redox reactions in which oxygen is consumed and energy and carbon dioxide and water are produced as byproducts. The energy which is stored in the form of ATP, but the excess energy is lost in the form of heat. Hence, in respiration, heat also produced. This heat is very important to balance the homeostasis of our body because we are endotherms. That means we have to maintain the constant temperature within our body, that is about 37 degrees centigrade or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Even the excess heat is generated within the metabolic activity. Our body controls and coordinate through central nervous system and various glands present in our body. They control the overall temperature of our body and the heat produced in cellular respiration. Hence, we observe various changes in our body in various seasons. To maintain constant temperature, whether it may be hotter or colder, our body have to do certain balance. The external heat transfer is by various types of mechanism, that is radiation, conduction, convection and through evaporation or precipitation, that is sweat. The body takes the important role to balance the temperature, that is heat produced in the cellular respiration. If the body is very or too hot, our sweat glands are producing enormous sweat and it cools the body or skin through process called evaporation. After getting cooling, our sweat also decreases and we can observe it in vigorous exercise or walking or heavy lifting or heavy work or during in urgency also. Our body is responding through shivering. In shivering, what happens? The muscles are contracting and releasing enormous ATP which is stored in our muscles, and during this process the heat is liberated and which keeps our body warm and protecting us from shivering or cold. All these things are due to the ATP which is stored in our muscle cells, which is undergoing further activity, that is cellular respiration, and it releases energy and it balances the temperature. Hence, there is a relation between the cellular respiration and the heat balance of our body. Now we understand that cellular respiration in our body, which is very important to keep us alive. This is one of the sophisticated mechanism through which our body gets energy very fast, that is respiration. And Till now we understand how the ATP is produced through cellular respiration, that is aerobic respiration, within the powerhouses of our cell, that is mitochondria, and how the heat is produced and what's the balance between the heat and the respiration, and how our body is balancing the total heat according to various conditions of the surroundings. Is respiration is the same in all organisms including plants and microbes? We will meet and discuss how different types of respiratory organs are evolved and how different types of methods are involved in the process of respiration including plants. Until then, bye bye, and we will meet again and see you soon. Thank you.